Welcome back to the Dublin Citizens Assembly for our conclusion of today, our fourth weekend, the 10th of September in the Wellston Blue and Golden Lane in Dublin. For those joining us online, the Assembly members have just been deliberating on the structure of the ballot paper, and we're going to open up to the floor now if you have any questions on that. But just before we get your feedback, the next steps in this process is that we're going to compile all of your presentations, put those in a pack for you, and again send them out to you by Monday the 19th of September. We're also going to take your feedback from this particular session on the ballot paper. Again, we'll give you all that feedback, and indeed we will now draft an updated draft ballot papers for the three ballot papers. We'll send those to you by Monday the 19th of September, and if you have any feedback on those, the content, the structure, please email back to Secretariat and they'll be amended accordingly. If you have no comments, we'll adopt the silent procedure, so if you don't hear back from you, that'll be an indication that you're satisfied with the content and the construct of the ballot paper. So that'll be Monday. You have that by Monday the 19th. Give us feedback by that weekend, and then that gives the Secretariat a week to put the final ballot papers when we meet in 3 weeks' time in Dublin Castle on the 1st of October. So that's the next step. So may I open it up to the floor, please, for any questions? Or any issues. So Luke from table 3. Thank you.
So from our table, we've one very clear question, but it kind of talks to the where we're at. And the main question is, like, will we get to vote on if we're ready or not to have the final vote as a whole assembly? And the reason for this is we feel like we're almost, there's a loose structure kind of emerging from how we are, talking about what things are looking like, but that we haven't had enough time to look at what the DM's office actually looks like, what the reform of the government structure underneath the proposed version of New Assembly really looks like, and then we haven't had really enough time to go into how the new Citizens Assembly, Dublin City Assembly, or work group, plenary council actually functions. And then for us, there is a big divide at the local government level as to whether or not it's the 4 councils or the town councils. And we feel that we just haven't had enough time to really go into that to make a vote on it just yet. So our short question is, will we get to vote if we're ready to have the final vote? Or could there be a potential extra stage of collecting more information statistically from the whole assembly?
Yes, so you've been asked this afternoon, and you probably haven't got to your feedback paper on question 13. Do you feel you have enough time to make a recommendation? Essentially, do you have enough time? Do you have enough information to make a vote? If you don't, you need to articulate that in that paper. And as I mentioned previously, Dr. A. Quinlivan is going to produce a town council structure presentation, 10-minute presentation that'll be uploaded. So if there are things like that you need, please let us know and we'll get that information out to you. Does that answer the question, Luke? Yeah. Yes, is the answer. Yeah, okay. Okay, thanks. Table 5, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just a quick question in relation to a candidate getting their name on a ballot paper to run for directly elected mayor. I know it was mentioned earlier that parties could put their own candidate forward. What happens in the case of independents? If an independent wanted to run, you can't have 50 names obviously on a ballot paper. Will there be something similar to the kind of structure that exists for someone to run in a presidential election, where in this case the 4 councils would have to agree, or how exactly would that be done? I don't think that's been very clear to date. Thank you.
Okay, so this is your ballot paper. This is your report with your recommendations. It's up to you to decide. Another question from table 5, please.
So we just wanted to know, as a group, with the models that were put forward this afternoon, will all of them appear on the ballot paper on the 1st of October, or will it be the original 4 we were given today and then it's a pick and mix?
Yeah, it's either or. We need to look and see. We're going to compile all of the presentations and see is there, when we reflect upon it, see is there a consensus amongst, is there a couple of models that are they similar? So it's hard to judge at this particular point. Paul, the question 5, table 5 again, please.
I can move to another table if you want to call out a different number. Just to follow up on that question from our table from Nicole, to me it seemed the sequencing was wrong. That we had that whole discussion this morning where so many, it seemed to me at least when I listened to all those presentations, so many kind of variations and hybrids came up from those 4. Yet now we get a ballot paper with just those 4. Sort of seems, you know, skew with, at least to me, I could be wrong. Art shaking his head in disagreement. And the second thing I want to just ask a question on, I understand that Waterford and Cork were given the question, you know, the people were given the question, do you want a directly elected mayor? And they said, no, we don't. So that question's on our ballot paper, and my brain is telling me that definitely should be a plebiscite. However, it would seem illogical that that vote would be taken by the citizens of Dublin prior to them having a lot of information in relation to basically what we've all been discussing. So that would seem to require it going out on radio, TV debates, etc., newspapers, whatever, social media, etc., like that. So I'm just wondering, is there any plan if the conclusion is, yes, the people should be consulted whether they want a directly elected mayor or not, if that's the conclusion, that there would be some system put in place where the people would be informed of these discussions and conclusions of these discussions?
To the second question, that's for the Assembly members. If the Assembly think that it's a good idea to get the information out, and then if you think that there needs to be a plebiscite, there can be a counter-argument that you don't need them because it's been decided by government that Dublin will have a directly elected mayor, but it's up to you to decide what recommendations you give. And that could be one of the recommendations, Paul. And the first, I'll hand over to Art.
If I can just say something on the 2 issues. I wasn't shaking my head in disagreement, but as a civil servant, it's my natural state, you know, just is to say no to everything. You know, it's a natural reaction. I have 4 children, so I'm very good at it. So, just on the issue, we wanted to know whether you as a group would be more comfortable selecting from a series of models or simply trying to build your own by asking a whole series of questions which would define different features. It would be easier for us if we just gave you a number of models and say pick one of these. We'll take away all of the feedback from this morning's session, and if we can craft a limited number of, because a lot of people discounted Model A or Model D or whatever, but brought in tweaks to C and D. If we can create a small number of models which covers everything that the tables say, that might be an easier way of dealing with it. But if there are as many variations as there are tables, it might be easier to build it using a series of questions like, do you want a deputy mayor? Do you want a plenary session? Do you want a recall petition, etc., etc.? And then we will build a structure build a ballot paper based on what you're saying to us. That's why we're going to take 10 days in it, because we're going to go through every single thing that you have. The second point you made is a really interesting one, because the big criticism of the last 2 plebiscites in both Cork and Waterford is that The question that was asked was simply, do you like a directly elected mayor? Nobody knew what the powers were, what the structures are going to be, etc., etc. The whole purpose of a citizens' assembly is to create recommendations around that. And the normal way that this would happen in advance of a plebiscite would that the government would produce a piece of legislation or would produce a report to say, if the result of the plebiscite is such that the people of Dublin agree to create a directly elected mayor, this is what the powers will be, this is what the structure is going to be, and unlike the situation with Cork and Waterford, you will actually have the structure and the powers, and you will have greater information in relation to what this person could or couldn't do. So this is the benefit of all the hard work that you're doing right now, is that this will add to the information that citizens of Dublin will have when it comes to voting in a plebiscite, if that happens too.
And the flip side would be, if they don't get all this information and just get that simple question and say no, then we're all wasting our time.
Correct, but that doesn't seem to have been the approach that the government have taken so far. I think they have learned from, I won't call it the mistake, but they've learned from the experience of both Cork and Waterford, because the government programme says, the programme for government for the three parties say that directly elected mayors are a good thing, and the government will facilitate and encourage where possible. So if Dublin gets a directly elected mayor, it is likely that Galway, Limerick, whatever, might go down that road as well. So, but we'll see. But no matter what happens, this group will blaze the trail from which others will follow as well. So if you give the government a template to say, here are the powers that a mayor should have, this is the structure which we feel is important to support those powers, and here's a whole load of recommendations on how it should be funded, the term limits, and all the other questions, the role of councillors and everything you'd like to include in it, I think that will assist the government in making their mind up. The fewer stones you leave uncovered, the better, I would have thought.
And just on the structures, Paul, it might be a case where you give the principles, the structure should have the following. And so you're pointing the government in a particular direction. We recommend, as a principle, the structure has A, B, C, D, E, as an example. Table 4, then table 7. Thanks.
Hello. Our table was just a question about the one that should we have a deputy mayor. I don't think anybody ever mentioned a deputy mayor. Like, is that just adding another question in there that we have to?
That's good. And if you don't think that's a relevant question, please say so.
Okay.
Please say so.
Thank you.
It came from the roundtable discussions from the last meeting. When the tables got into the initial design phase, a number of tables raised the issue of, because the mayor appeared to have a large burden, and they felt that some support was necessary for the mayor, and that's the only reason it's on the table, is that it came, or it was on the paper, is that it came from the tables from the meeting at the end of June. But if it's not a runner, so be it.
Thanks. Table 7, John.
Thanks very much. Just 2 quick points. One is similar to the point that Deirdre was making about the nomination process. I think it is important that we have a question or a vote on how the directly elected mayor is nominated, and that it's important that that's as open as possible, so that it's possible for a directly elected mayor to be nominated, for example, by being nominated by councillors, but it's also possible for members of the public or people on the electoral register to nominate. Otherwise, it would become a very closed process, and I don't think we want it to be open only to politicians. And I think it's probably also important to define the role of existing councillors, whether we think councillors should be full-time or not, or if there's an assembly, is it only the assembly that's full-time, or is it all councillors? Personally, I think that councillor is a full-time role, but that's a decision for the assembly, or a recommendation for the assembly, and a decision then for government.
Yes, John, I agree entirely, and I do think that we should deal with the issue of nomination. You know, there is some criticism always of the process around the candidacy for the presidential elections, that it is seen as a closed shop, that you either have to get the approval of political parties or nominated by council. So, but we can provide the full spectrum here. You can make it that, well, you can be nominated by political parties. We can create a menu, or to encourage independence, as Deirdre indicated, then you would simply ask people to pay a deposit, which might discourage the more frivolous candidates, or that you would ask for a certain number of signatures from members of the public to support your candidacy as well. So we can put all of those options on the ballot, but as the chairman said, this will be a matter for yourselves to decide. We will put it on the draft ballot that we send out to you, and you can decide or not whether to keep it on or not.
Table 4.
Just following on from that, we probably should have some sort of system in it that occurs where there's a maximum on election spend. So that's in most of the other elections. So the presidential elections, it's hundreds of thousands. So we don't want a system, certainly I think the view of my table is that we don't want a system where it's only eligible to people that can afford it.
Yeah,
And that again could be a recommendation, not the amount, but there's a recommendation that that's put into to the model for direct elected mayor.
Yeah, I put it on the list of things you might like to consider, campaign spending limits, because at the moment the Standard and Public Office, using the legislation, have campaign spending limits. It tends to depend on the size of the constituency. In a presidential election, it's the whole country, so you're allowed to spend more because you have a bigger distance travelled, more people to reach out to. European Parliament elections, the amount is a little lower again, and as you come down in Dáil elections and in local elections, the figures decrease and decrease. Now, this is going to be Dublin. This is 1.4 million people, so it is likely to be greater. Using the same ratio, it's likely to be greater than in a Dáil election, where there is a large number of constituencies in the city of Dublin. So, but you can make a recommendation in relation to that, if you like, because, as you say, you don't want to discourage people who can't compete with some of the larger and better funded organisations.
Table 1, please.
As I assume there will be a limit to how many questions one wants on a ballot, our table was just suggesting that, you know, things that are very general and self-evident and for which, you know, there's already an obvious kind of consensus, that we shouldn't include too many of those, and that we should really have the ballot, you know, for questions where there is a real kind of divergence of opinion.
Okay, yeah, we'll certainly take that on board, table 1, when we're constructing the ballot paper. Thank you.
Very grateful to hear that.
Yeah,
to be honest, because I was looking at a 2-point font size in order to fit some of the questions, and we don't want a ballot paper that's like a toilet roll, you know. So we'll try. We may need, if there are a number of additional questions, what is now ballot 3 might end up being 2 ballot papers. Perhaps we'll try and group them in order as well. But I don't want you to feel restricted in relation to things that you feel you shouldn't, you can or shouldn't ask. Don't let the time we have available to us restrict you in that. This is time to do the right thing, as opposed to, because it's a once-in-a-lifetime chance. So we will have a better idea when we work out the feedback from this session and from the session this morning.
Question here from back to table 3, and Luke.
Yeah, just on the same point, I think there was a bit of confusion at our table about when we were presented these 3 ballots, and one of the things that came up as part of the discussion was it might be really valuable for the final vote to collect another round of information on all of the specific issues that are listed even today that have come up or that are on the ballot, and have that presented back to us for, you know, moving toward a final distillation of models or powers or things that we, like it came up as in the discussion, say that could be a really valuable.
Yeah. So what we're doing, from the facilitator's notes, we'll be compiling that and sending that back out to you in a pack together with a draft a draft ballot, and then you can comment on having that information, having the draft ballot. You can make comments.
It came up today that when Breed showed the votes today of which powers were to be devolved, that was an extremely informative thing for us as the Assembly members. So that's the main kind of point, really.
I mean, on the 1st of October, we will have information sessions in advance of the voting, and because we'll be doing phased voting, perhaps you might like to decide on the powers first, you know, just define the role of the job, and then decide on the structures afterwards. Now that we know what the job is, now then in the afternoon we'll work out what structures are required to support that as well. But you will, as we vote along, you will get the results in real time as well. So we'll be counting the votes in front of you, just so you're sure. So you will have maximum information before you're asked to commit yourself to anything. Yeah, we're all about transparency.
Yeah. Okay, 1 minute past 5. Any further questions from the Assembly members? We have one question from table 10, please.
Thank you. Just a comment really on ballot paper 1. 2 of the items that are mentioned there, education and healthcare, they're just such broad-ranging areas and have huge budgets and government departments running them, that really, if we were expected to include those as part of the powers, they should be somewhat broken down or some more information given. That's just a comment.
Okay, thanks for that.
Thank you.
Art?
I agree entirely, and in your wisdom this afternoon, education has already been broken down into primary and tertiary education, and 2 suggestions came from 2 different tables in relation to that particular issue, putting healthcare. One recommended primary healthcare and another table recommended community healthcare. So we'll reflect both of those in the ballot. You'll get 2 options under education and at least 2 options under healthcare as well. So again, we'll gather up all the information that you have given us and we'll feed that back to you in the draft ballot paper.
Any further questions? I'm in your hands. Table 10.
Irresistible.
Yeah. Could I just propose something else? Would it be possible, perhaps, to allow individual members of the Assembly to propose their own idea or something, and then have that voted on by everyone, and either accepted or rejected?
Well, is that not what we're doing? So if you tell us you want something on the ballot paper, we'll put it on the ballot paper. Yeah. So if people don't understand what it means, then we'll ask you to explain what it means. But my experience here is that if you ask a room full of 80 people what they think should happen, then we're going to get 80 answers. So the idea of 80 independent republics making a decision or a recommendation on this is quite difficult. The whole idea about the ballot paper and everybody having the opportunity to contribute to the ballot paper, that we will coalesce around everything that you want to include. If at the end of the process, when you see the final ballot paper, you feel your opinion or your question or your proposal is not included in it, you will have the opportunity to make a call, and then, subject to the chairman's wishes, perhaps we could have a show of hands whether we wanted to add that to the ballot paper or not. But again, we're back. We've already spoken about one of the chairman's principles of transparency. The other principle is equality of voice. You know, everybody's voice in this room counts, and if you feel your voice is not being heard, then you should tell us about it.
Okay, any further questions?
Quick, move on.
Okay, so at just 4 minutes past 5, just to close the session, I'd first of all like to thank the hotel, the Radisson Blue, here in Golden Lane, in the city centre of Dublin. It's our first time in the Radisson. We've all been very impressed with the hospitality, with the standard of the meal at lunchtime. So to the catering staff and to the staff here at the Radisson, just give me a bit of buzz, please. Thank you. To the facilitators and note takers, it's been a busy day for you. You certainly earned your corn and your today. So thank you so much for Carolyn and the team for being so on point today. A lot was thrown at you. So really thank you so much for your continued work. Please, Assembly members, give them a round of applause. Thank you. To Q4, our media relations, thank you so much for all you've done for us. I think we might have hit some of the media outlets today. I'm sure we will on the 1st of October, that's for sure. To PI Communications for your broadcasting, and to those online, joining us online. To our sign language interpreters, Darren and Lisa, Gurmalgut. To our expert advisory group, again, who gave up their time to be with us this afternoon, all day. Derek Breed, Jane, our guest presenters, again, who gave up their time, Sean, Mark and Brian, Gurmila Margaret. And finally, to the Secretariat. Often when I get to these events, it reminds me when you arrive at Intercrow Park for a big game, and you just turn up and you get off the bus and everything's there and we're ready to rock and roll. But behind the scenes, a phenomenal amount of work has been done by the Secretariat, who are looking after us all. So to Cathal, Tim, Lorraine Kavanagh, Lorraine Sexton, Denise Deirdre, Shane, Katie, Louisa, who was on the camera today taking the photographs, and indeed to our Secretariat General, to Art, Gurmila Mila Margaret. Finally, to conclude, to you, to Noel Saronach, the free citizens of Dublin, thank you so much for all your time that you've given to this really important project and matter for the citizens of Dublin and the wider Irish state. What really has impressed us all from the Secretariat to the EAG is your ability to assimilate all this information. It's multi-layered, it's complex. I think you've shown really today that in a short space of time, and I know we never have enough time, and we're not looking for perfection, we're just all trying to do our best, and certainly you put your best foot forward today, and for that you need to be commended. So maybe the EAG and the Secretariat will give the citizens a round of applause. Well done. What's also impressed me is your ability to stay on our key principles, and Art referenced one of them there in terms of equality of voice. But your openness, we've been very transparent, the fairness that you've shown to each other, the respect, the collegiality, and that psychological safety where people can feel valued, they can share their opinions and beliefs without any fear, and there's a safe space in this room, and you've created an environment we haven't. So I really want to thank you for that, and indeed for your service, your sense of duty. We were speaking here about the history of Dublin, the history of the state. Dublin is, in terms of its county boundaries, it's very old. You're now, as Art's words, blazing a trail to set up structures that will benefit all the citizens of Dublin and the wider Irish state for generations to come, and that needs to be commended and recognised for the give of your time, your valuable time from your family, your friends. Is really you're a special group. It's a privilege for us to be working with you on this project. We're nearly there, but we still have a lot of another few twists and turns in that river, and a bit of turbulence maybe when we get on the first to vote. So again, thank you so much. We will have those, and we're committed to getting you those documents out to you by Monday the 9th. Please give us your feedback, and have a lovely weekend, and we'll see you in 3 weeks' time. God bless.